Alrighty, welcome back guys to the next build video that I was planning on doing. I got a lot of questions last time on the ailment sorcerer that I made about what better ways you might maybe build a sorcerer, because the ailment sorcerer isn't going so hot. And this is what I have come up with for like a pyromancer sort of mage build. This is the Wolcen early access if you haven't seen any of my videos or you haven't followed the stream. And let's go over the passive skills, the active skills, the attributes, and then we'll do an expedition real quick, and I'll demonstrate to you guys what we're working with. So the idea behind the Pyromancer build is obviously to do as much fire damage as possible. What's going to help us here is the enemy's Denial Sword, which is going to have us do 43% higher burn chance and a lot of extra fire damage, and then the 7th Purified Legion Archive, which is going to allow us to use a lot of Rage and a lot of Wisdom and hop back and forth between them. This is a hybrid build, by the way. This is a hybrid build. So we're going to be using Pyro Balls. I think it's called Consuming Ember. For the majority of our actual damage, it's going to have a lot of Pierce. As you can see, we're shooting 2 at a time. You can actually get that significantly higher. You can get up to 3, 4, or even 5 fireballs, but it becomes extremely expensive if you get it up higher than 2. So for the most part, we're using 2, and with the Pierce we have, it's not a problem. See, you can go here and you can shoot 3 fireballs, like a kind of a shotgun wizard if you really want to also. But like I said, it's just not validated with the extra cost. I'm going to go down here. We're also going to use Warpath, and we're going to use Warpath as a fire skill. As you can see, it leaves a fiery trail behind us that does a significant amount of burning damage, and it does a fiery shockwave in front of us as well. And we're going to be using Bleeding Edge as a sort of fire skill as well, to contribute not only bleed ailment stacks, but also fire damage stacks. We have Winter's Grasp, just for CC and also for the frost damage buff. And then we have the Bulwark, which is giving us a ton of resistances, it's giving us healing, and it's giving us sacred damage on all of our spells. So how do we build this? How does this go? Let's go over here to the Gate of Fates. And this build is all over the place. You might be looking at this going, holy crap, you've got warrior traits, you've got rogue traits, you've got 2 different warlock classes going on. And yeah, this build is wild. This is a wild build. We're all over the place with this. The idea is that we're going to be enhancing our projectile damage as much as possible, which in this case is a fireball, and then we're going to be generating a ton of rage, and we're going to be dumping the rage with Bleeding Edge and that fiery warpath. So the first thing you want to do is come down, get all your spell damage, ailment damage, come right up into here to get the 15% spell casting speed and 10% damage, and then come down here and get all of these. You want the ferocity, you want the critical hit damage, you want all that. You want to come over here and get the maximum health and 15% health regeneration. It's not vital for the build, but it allows you to come over here to the Warlock and get all this extra juicy spell damage. Come up here, get that 25 wisdom. Over here, get a little bit of force shield and force regeneration. I'm going to show you how that works with a little bit of survivability later. And that allows you to hop over here and get these projectile spheres. +1 pierce to all projectiles, which is really good. This gives you more force shield. 25% damage when you're far away from the enemies. Ideally we want to be. You're not always going to be, but at least you start the engagement far away. Also, we get another +1 projectile here, minus 60% of all projectile damage, but it doubles the number of projectiles that you have, essentially. I played with and without this. This is a good talent for efficiency, but you can drop the Archean's teachings if you want to spec into that second fireball. And I feel like you push a little bit more damage that way, a little bit more, but it costs significantly more, and your wisdom efficiency is all over the place with that. Over here, you want to come down and get your critical. You want to get the wild card, as almost always, and you want to come all the way up here and get killing an enemy grants 5% damage for each ailment stack on that enemy. And you can get this really going. We're going to have frost damage in this build, fire damage in this build, bleed damage in this build. So you can get a lot of stacks of this. It is potentially 25% additional damage for each ailment type that you can stack up. We won't be getting that maximum very often, but still, this is Immortal Offering is great, and the damage really does creep up. So this is how the build goes, more or less. In terms of active skills, you can kind of use what you want to. You want to be using some kind of projectile. I'm going to use Consuming Embers, obviously, for your primary damage, and then you need Rage Dump. You need some way to get rid of your Rage. Warpath is ridiculously overpowered right now, so I'm using Warpath with the Fire attunement right down here. Everlasting Ember converts physical damage to fire damage, and it increases the damage of it too. Just kind of fit with the class fantasy of playing a bit of a Pyromancer here. Also leaves a damaging area on the ground, really cool. And then this creates a damage dealing shockwave at the end of the charge. It does a significant amount of damage. It probably does too much damage. It's critting around 6k or so for me, which is up there with some of the highest attacks that this character can do. On top of that, we're going to be using Bleeding Edge. Now, there's a couple fun things you can do with Bleeding Edge. What I'm doing right now is the axe follows you as you move. The axe keeps spinning for a short duration and increased rotation speed. But right down here, Will of the Wisp, you get converts base physical damage to fire damage. And that fits into the class fantasy of Pyromancer a little bit more. That being said, you have to give up one of the two, either the axe following you as you move, or the axe spinning for a short duration after being thrown. I really like the axe spinning with you. So you can get rid of this one, and you can take the fire if you want to. It also works very well, and because of some of the gear that we're using, it hits hard. It hits really hard. So you can do kind of whatever you want to do there. You're going to be generating rage essentially with all these fireballs. And then you're going to be using your Warpath and your Fiery Axe. And then that gives you all your willpower back. More fireballs. Another burning Warpath, and another couple axes. That's the idea. In terms of survivability, it's decent. It's not great. We have about 800 health, and our force shield's about 2800. I can actually get that health up a bit. I was messing around with my gems, so I actually don't have gems socketed in my Grand Robe right now. I can easily just go put some in, which I think I will, just for the sake of the video. But you're not going to have a whole lot of health. You do have a decent amount of force shield with this. This helps. I have a unique here, the Hakaresh Sheliar, I guess. It grossly increases the amount of force shield that you have in your character, and it increases the force shield generation rate, the lag time before it starts regenerating. So this helps in terms of survivability. This caster here can get squashed, for sure. He can just get eaten alive. But this helps if you happen to have this item. If you don't, it's not necessary. Let's grab some gems in here and throw them in real quick. 86 health, 85 health, 82. We got a 90 and a 90. We have two 90s, and then we have two support gems to put in real quick. We'll probably just put in the ferocity. Yeah, we'll just put in ferocity. Alrighty. There we go. That'll increase our damage. That'll increase our health marginally, but this isn't a tanky. This isn't a tanky build. So if you go up into here, average damage 415, you can't really go by that too much. But we have about a 36% chance to crit with almost 300,000 extra crit damage, and we have exactly 300 ferocity right now with the current setup that we have. Other pieces of gear that are noteworthy is the thirst. My thirst is level 3. It is what it is. I haven't gotten a better one. I would very much like to, but I haven't. Thirst is great. You do lose 22% maximum health when you use Thirst, but this isn't a tanky build, so who cares? That 44% spell damage is disgusting. The Wisdom helps. It's nice with a little bit of the burn chance, but it's not super necessary. What you're going to be wanting on most of your items is plus damage to spells. So like plus 7 fire damage to spells, plus 8 aether damage to spells, plus 7 shock damage to spells. That's really how your base damage is going to start to climb with a build like this. Alright, let's get in, do an expedition really quick so you can kind of see how this plays in real time. I'll just do an adept level, just for proof of concept. You'll be surprised how little you have to use your various potions. The fireballs pierce at least once. If you have better gear, they can pierce numerous more times than that. But that's because of, right down here, +1 pierce to all projectiles. Now you can get that on gear, you can get it on belts, rings, things like that. It's rare, it's a rare affix, but you can definitely get it, and if you do, it makes this build even better. The more tightly bound the enemies are, the more damage you do to them. You have Bulwark, which you can keep up a decent amount of the time. As you can see on the bottom left here, we have stacks of Immortal Offering. Fire, bleed stacks, frost stacks. Just gonna pick up some of these interacts. You kind of choose up groups of enemies. Remember, you do extra damage the further away from enemies you are. One of the surprising heroes of this build is Warpath. Again, as I've said before, I think it's a little overtuned, but it works very, very well for this build. Remember that you do damage with Warpath both coming and going. That trail that it leaves behind ticks for about 1,000 and can put the burn effect on enemies. And it does a shockwave that moves forward from wherever you land that does 4, 5, 6,000 damage crits. Also, fire damage. All of this scales with fire damage. You can see the fireballs piercing through the enemies. Super efficient. If you want a rage dump, you can just use a couple bleeding edges. I like to save a little bit of rage because I like to initiate with Warpath. One of the problems with most of these sorcerer builds is just how wisdom starved they are. You almost always have to run 2 wisdom potions, and you're chugging them after every battle, or even sometimes in the middle of battle. But with this hybrid build here, it's not really that necessary, because you're constantly draining your rage right back into wisdom. Should be down this way. Now, single target, this build does struggle a little bit more. It almost seems like a lot of times in Wolcen you almost have to choose between whether you want good AoE or whether you want good single target. If we wanted this build to be a better single target build, we'd invest more heavily into wisdom, and we'd choose more passives that help with ailment stacks. As you can see, the build just tears apart large groups of enemies, but with single targets, it's slightly less impressive. See the Warpath just burning them all there? It's really nasty. But I'll show you how single target goes anyway. So that's the idea behind the Pyromancer that I made. You could certainly make the commentary that this was just +1 enemy level. How well does this scale into the end game of expeditions? And the answer is not super well. With better gear, obviously it would. But this character is significantly behind my turret kind of gunslinger build that I made, which is considerably less geared. But that's just the way the Wolcen early access has kind of been going so far. It hasn't been super friendly to casters. This is probably the best sorcerer build that I've made yet. That's not necessarily saying that it's competitive with some of the other melee or even kind of bow pistol builds that are out there. But I think you could have a lot of fun with this. It clears fairly well. You're pretty self-sustainable with the rage and the willpower going back and forth. You kind of get to experience numerous aspects of the game when you're playing a build like this, because you get to utilize those rage abilities, you get to utilize some of the rage mobility and bleeding edge, but you also get to, you know, crap out a bunch of fireballs. I don't know. I like it. I'm having fun with it. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I think I'm going to try an expedition that's slightly harder now. Let's go with a +3 and see if we can handle level 30 mobs with this. Oh, of course, they split right by him. What did I get here? Oh, a triple-barreled pistol. Actually, I need that for my other character, so it's nice when that works, right? Another good example of Warpath doing ridiculous damage. I actually ran right into it. Fortunately, all my force shield ate it, and it didn't kill me. That was a very effective engagement, even though the enemies are considerably higher level. Nothing up here. I was hoping there'd be a chest. Looks like we can come down to the left. I suppose you could make a character like this with any kind of thematic element. If you wanted to make like a cryomancer, like a frost mage, or a lightning sorcerer, something along those lines. The thing that I like most about this build is how little I have to depend on wisdom potions. It's practically never. boss is to the north of us. Alrighty, here comes the boss encounter. My warpath fucked up there. I went exactly 1 foot. So that wasn't too bad for an undergeared sorcerer-like character to do a plus 10 level expedition. It seems to be fine. It seems to be comfortable, right? The damage seems more than sufficient, and the survivability seems okay. So if you guys have any questions, comments, either put them in Twitch chat or put them down in the YouTube comment section, because I'll be posting the VOD of this a little bit later. But this is the most effective sorcerer build I've built yet, and I call it